Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name's Andy R and this is the Brotherhood of Men, a channel solely dedicated to getting new men out there the best outcome in your lives. Now, I do that by giving you information, and in this video I want to expand on information I gave you earlier. I forgot to put it in that video. Now, which video am I talking about? Well, previously I uploaded a second video about why marriage is not for men. It quite literally isn't structured legally for you. It's all for the women. In that, I was talking about the legal document, which is the marriage license, the marriage certificate, and that being a contract. I also mentioned in it that there are three parties to that contract: the husband, the wife, and the state, i.e. government. I also asked the question, what on earth is government doing getting involved in your marriage? But in that contract, if you read it, that kernel of truth is there for pretty much all westernized countries. It states that you, the man, are to provide for the wife. There's no reciprocal clause in that about the wife having to do anything really for the man. It's all a one direction. Now, in that also, it was a case that these laws were made many years ago, when women were in a very much a weaker position than they are now. Nothing has really changed in those laws to keep up with changing times. In other words, women are as prevalent in the workplace as men are, or the fact that sometimes women are earning more than men, but men are still expected to provide in the divorce. And that's the bit that I forgot to mention in that previous video, is that for the divorce to happen, it has to be an agreement of all three parties. All three parties have to agree to the divorce. So you want to divorce your wife, or your wife wants to divorce you. Already you are in a weaker position, because the courts can only follow their guidelines. In other words, what is written law. And in the contract that you agreed to and you signed, and this is why I keep calling it a slave certificate, is that you agreed unilaterally to provide for your wife. And that is the guideline that the court starts with. It doesn't matter if you don't want to get divorced and your wife is brought this divorce case, because we know that divorce is 70% of them, and that's a climbing number, but 70% of divorces are instigated by women, and usually for the simple reason they're bored. Familiarity breeds contempt. They get contemptuous about you. They no longer respect you. You are the old and boring, and some new and shiny has come along and they want that instead. So they're bored with you and they want rid of you. So they file for divorce. If you don't want the divorce to happen and you voice your expectations, your complaints, your point of view to the court is already not on your side. You see, courts are supposed to be arbiters. They're supposed to be independent. That judge is supposed to not favour one side or the other. He's supposed to come in like a referee and not have any kind of any sort of prejudice against one party or the other. But because the courts have to follow the guidelines of the law, the court is already stacked against you. When people say, oh, the courts are stacked against men, they quite literally are, because you signed a contract where you agreed to provide for your wife. So the courts are looking at the situation from that standpoint. So when you say, I don't want a divorce, she's brought it for XYZ reasons, but I don't want a divorce, I still love her, we've got children together, the best thing for the kids is for us to stay together. All of those reasons will be heard by the court, but because the court has to follow the guidelines and legislation as it's written down, or precedent, excuse me, they are already sided against you. They can only follow what the guidelines are, and the guidelines say that you have to provide for her. This is why so many men in the family courts and in the divorce courts, which are usually called the family courts, that's part of it, are getting such bad outcomes because you agreed to have a bad outcome. You agreed to provide for the woman in that legal document. And I forgot to mention in that previous video that three parties need to be in agreement. Well, the court is part of government. It might be a separate entity, but it is ruled by the legislation of the government. So they have to follow that ruling. So that's your wife wants to divorce you, and the court knows that there is no impediment to them siding with the wife because you will be picking up the tab. You agreed to supply her. You agreed, to provide for her. You agreed that in the contract. A contract, I might add, that you signed, and this is true of pretty much all men, you signed without knowing what the clauses of that contract are. That is an extremely foolish move. Any contract you ever sign, you better make sure that you've read it from one side to the other, backwards and forwards, and understood what's in that contract. Have you ever signed a employment contract and then found out later that there is some onerous clause in there that actually makes you work 100 hours a week for no extra pay because you didn't bother reading it? No, hopefully that never happened to you because you're smart enough to read a contract before you sign it. And this is the point. We're never given the clauses of the contract. We're just given a certificate to sign to say that we are married. That's got to be hiding clauses. There's got to be something in there about it's a onerous contract. There's got to be something in that. Maybe you could talk to, if you're a lawyer or a solicitor out there, and maybe you can tell me if that's the case. Being offered a contract to sign where you're not also shown what the clauses are. I'm sure that that's not entirely legal, but it happens daily. It happens thousands of times a day across the Western world. Men literally go into the slaughterhouse of weddings, walk down the aisle, stand there and say, I do. It doesn't matter the vows that you give and receive in front of that religious part of the ceremony. They're verbal. They mean nothing. You can't then stand in the court and say, well, she agreed to this and she agreed to that, and then she broke all of those promises. Well, tough. Show me where that's written down. But we do have this legal document that you sign, which you've agreed to all of these clauses that you knew nothing about. So the three parties need to agree to the divorce. So if the wife has said she wants a divorce, that's a 50-50 then. It's you and her. So now it's the government. Well, the government has no reason to keep the marriage going so long as nobody is putting pressure on the government for resources. I.e., you've agreed to provide for her, so the government isn't worried about her provisions. You've agreed to provide for her, so the government's not out of pocket. So the government's quite happy to let the divorce go through. So now it's 2 against 1. You're in a much weaker position. You are quite literally walked into a court in a very weak position with no cards in your hand, expecting to play high-risk poker. You're going to lose. And men do. Time after time after time after time after time and again. We hear the stories of a man's success because it's so rare. It makes news headlines when a man comes out on top in the divorce courts. And then the women are jumping up and down going, this isn't right, this shouldn't happen, it's down to the men, they should be the ones doing blah, 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 blah. And that's how it's been for them for many, many, many years. But we men are starting to realise that it's no place for a man married. Now, excuse me, if she wants a marriage, she wants the ceremony, she wants the occasion, and you're happy to go along with that. Why don't you suggest a religious marriage? So that you get to go to the church, temple, synagogue, whichever, wherever it is that you want it to be held. She gets to do all the dressing up. You get to spend tens of thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever, on this one day where she is the centre of attention, but you don't sign the legal document. There's nothing stopping her from changing her last name to your last name so that you can present yourself as man and wife. You've had a religious ceremony where you've agreed certain things to each other through your vows. You've done all of that. You just don't go into that back office afterwards and sign away your freedom and agree to things that you don't know anything about, to clauses that you haven't read. So why don't you suggest that? Say, yeah, I'll marry you, so long as it's a religious ceremony, so long as it's a religious marriage. See what happens then. See the true nature of what you're being asked to do then. Because I can pretty much guarantee that that one, no, we need to sign that piece of paper. Why are you so keen for me to sign a legal document? Something I have that's not in my favour, that has clauses in that I know nothing about. Why are you so keen for me to sign that? And why are you so keen to sign it? See what happens. So as I've said many times before, this is not a place for men, and I just wanted to add that other piece of information to that existing video and go over a few of the facts as well, that it takes those three parties, which you probably didn't realise until you watched this video or the previous video, that there were three parties to the wedding, and one of those parties is the state, the government. And who runs the courts? The government. Who pays the courts? The government. So when you go into court asking for a fair crack of the whip and telling your story about how she has completely trashed the marriage through her behaviour, or that you don't want a divorce because maybe there are children involved, and we all know that medically and scientifically and psychologically the best outcome for children is to be in a household where the two parents are raising the children so that you get a balanced outcome. And you say all of this, but the courts for some reason aren't listening to you. Now if you're a man who's been through divorce, you already know this. You already know that you weren't listened to really in the divorce. You were pretty much railroaded. Leave down in the comments down below your experience on that. Tell the other brothers your experience. Tell them how you were treated by the divorce courts. But you were treated that way because you agreed to be treated that way. You just didn't know you were agreeing to it. Anyway, my name's Andy R. This is the Brotherhood of Men. I hope you've got something from this video because I want this channel to grow. I want it to be bigger and better than it is now. And the only way that can happen is with your support. And you existing subscribers, you are the best of the best. You truly are great men. You've supported me from the beginning. A lot of you, right from the very beginning, you subscribed and you knew nothing about me. You knew nothing about the message I was saying, and you showed faith in me. And hopefully I'm keeping the faith going by giving you valuable information that you can use in your life. For those of you who are not subscribed, hey, hit the subscribe button. Come on in, join the Brotherhood, become a brother. You know, the brothers are a welcoming bunch. They're nice guys. You take care of yourself, because if you don't, who will? Anyway, I'm going for a cup of tea because I think I've earned one. As I say for many times, I'll talk to you guys later. You take care of yourself now. Bye.